Welcome to Muffin Talk.
Today we are going to look into the parables of compassion. Brother Kieran, these parables have been instrumental in shaping our spirituality. How do you see this?
I could not think of a better part of the gospel to reflect on the issue of spirituality and the gospel. Because at the heart of all our spirituality is our view of God, what our God is like, what our human experience of that God is, and how that God calls us to relate to others in the human family. In the Sermon on the Plain, Luke called us to relate, to be merciful and compassionate to others as God is merciful and compassionate to us. And to our needy world, we only have to look around to see a needy world. We have to see the power of the issues of relationship, the letters, the YHWH name, and I will be who I will be. I prefer that translation to I am who I am. And when God says to Moses that, when you bring the people out of Egypt, you will worship at this mountain, Jebel Musa. And, it's when you have completed this, you will know who I am, the deliverer God, who heard, who saw, and who took action to bring the people out. So it is a dynamic God rather than a static God. I will be who I will be. And, we have to ask that in our own lives. The God who has been and is being.
Brother Kieran, some years ago, I heard from a rabbi saying that his preferred translation of how God introduced himself was, I am life unfolding. There is no beginning and no end. I'm life unfolding.
Yes. There's kind of a Greek stasis to I am who I am, but there's a dynamism. I will be who I will be. So this chapter 15, these beautiful parables, this is called the gospel within the gospel. And they address what was most vital in the mission of Jesus, to reveal what God is like. Now, why did Jesus come? To show us the true face of God. This God, what God is like, the living, forgiving, Ema Abba. That's fair enough, mother, father, because we're going to have a woman and a man. And interesting, the woman is the central one of the three great parables. How God behaves towards us and expects us to behave in like manner towards one another. And I've always wondered, we call them the three parables of loss, but I think they're also the three parables of finding. But I'm not too sure about the older brother.
You refer to the prodigal son, the lost son, and in many languages it's the lost son.
I like the parable of the two lost sons, or the parable of the loving father is also quite popular. So yes, and what we're doing, I think it's important, family relationships. It's always important to link the explanation of the scriptures with pastoral issues. And these fit so beautifully into real life. And the Bible can't stand by itself. It has to relate its stories to modern pastoral issues, even though they're separated by time and culture. But it's rather interesting, culture is fascinating in the way it's sort of opening up these parables.
I find it interesting when you say about culture and opening up, because the word culture, it's like with a Latin, it's cultivation and culture. So when you cultivate a field, you also open it up for new fruit.
Oh, yes. that's also interesting in parables when you've got seed parables. So yes, it's really interesting because culture affects so much the telling and the understanding of these parables. And that's really, it's really interesting. I mean, if a little fellow from Kawakawa decided to head into Auckland and he got into big trouble, everybody in Kawakawa would know what happened. And why do you think the dad went out, running out? This old man went running out to enwrap his son in his arms because the shamed village might have beaten him up.
And I think that the fact that he gives him sandals quickly before he touches the ground gives him a chance of reconciliation before you have to go through a more thorough program.
And it's very interesting to use that word reconciliation, because the boy's got all his story to tell, but the father doesn't let him tell it. Reconciliation comes from the father. The parable of the waiting father, the parable of the forgiving father. It's such a powerful story.
It's also the forgiving because of the action, because he had no time to say words, but he returned. And so the action was enough to come that the father could forgive him.
And as for the rest of the village, the little village, they all come to a meal. And remember hospitality theme?
Yes.
So if they all come to the meal, then they have to accept the boy back. It's the reconciliation meal. Meals and reconciliation are powerful themes in the culture. And then, of course, it's really interesting that who should be sitting beside the father, presiding over the gathering?
The oldest son.
The older son. And of course, the father is shamed by the behavior of the older son. But what does the father do? The father went out to both sons. And then, of course, we're left with the question of, did the older brother come in? And it's really interesting that we have to answer that for ourselves. So I think it's really a credible story. But I think there are other factors involved in all of these telling of the stories.
But it's also that when I look at the fact from our perspective, we would say, why didn't the father just wait until the older son is back from the field? Well, maybe it took days until he came back, and by the time that he got the message, etc. But the fact that he started without letting the older son first appear and meet the brother, maybe there is some reason that it's like with Mary went out in haste. He had to do it quickly, immediately. You don't wait until somebody could change their mind or some rumors would be spread.
There's a big fuss going on when the son comes back and enters into the house. And then, of course, remember, the son is just outside in the fields and he hears the fuss going on and asks some of the servants that are round about. And he's outside sulking. So it's interesting to ask, who really is the servant? And he's got that servant mentality in the family. I've slaved for you. I mean, this really, again, is a pastoral issue. What is our attitude towards ministry? Is it just service? Where's the love factor in it? Where's the forgiveness? Where's the understanding? Where is the prodigal son mission going out? It's a little bit like we take our first story. Are we looking after the 99 sheep, or are we going out looking for the one that's lost? See how this impacts on mission? It's got such an interesting pastoral issue.
Isn't it also like the story with the workers in the vineyard, that the ones who worked longer thought that they would get more, and the owner of the vineyard says, well, it's up to me to give what belongs to me. And so in a way, the father could say, well, I didn't ask you, older brother, to give your inheritance, but I want to show the love of and compassion to both of you?
Everything I have is yours. Again, we're looking at culture, aren't we? Because there's this wonderful study that was done. Levinson was and he went out among all the cultures, the Arabic, Jewish cultures, said, have you ever heard of a situation of a younger son asking for his inheritance before the father has died? And no. They found one case, the father had done it, and then he just upped and died, the father. And then another reaction was, oh, if that happened, I'd beat the boy. Oh, why? Because he's saying, I wish you were dead. So yes, inheritance rights and culture and responses, and to understand the story, the forgiving father, that makes a lot more sense. But you know, the older brother, he's got this, remember, the younger son has to go out and do all the work that shames him, even looking after pigs. A Jewish boy looking after pigs, that would have to be in Gentile territory. And then you say, well, you know, who ends up being the one who's slaving? And that's the older brother in his spirit. Why is he so unattractive to us? Jesus spoke in the name of God. And you know, it's interesting, the definition of reconciliation as a forgiveness already received. When you turn to God in your heart, when you desire to go and celebrate the fact that you're reconciled with God. That reconciliation is in big trouble today. It's not being used anything like the extent it used to. And why? Because of fear. Often it's because of fear. I mean, I can go back to my own life, and the first God that I met, the God in Jesus Christ, I think it was about 30 when I started to recognize personal relationship with God was an important aspect of being a Christian, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That sort of stuff sounded like Protestantism, but they're right. And it's got to be, what does the church exist for? To make Jesus Christ known and loved. And that message is certainly contained in these three parables, the parable of the lost sheep. I mean, the favorite image of Jesus Christ is of carrying a sheep on his shoulders, the good shepherd image. And believe you me, carrying a sheep, that's pretty heavy, you know, because when a sheep gets lost and gets frightened, just lies on the ground and won't move. So the shepherd rejoices in the burden of finding the sheep, but also the burden of carrying it back. And as for the woman with the coin, now that's an interesting story too. We can't leave her out of it. The thing that I like about it most of all is it's the only one where it says she searched diligently for that lost coin. And what does she do when she finds it? Well, it's a bit like all of the stories. It has to have its party time. And the wonderful line that there's more joy in heaven over one sinner that repents than over 99 righteous who don't need to repent. Now, that's a really interesting line because the 99 do need to repent. And that's part of the problem, part of the older brother's problem. How do you relate to God? Do you relate to your father like the older brother, out of sense of duty and service? Or do you recognize, like the younger brother, who eventually lives with a loving, forgiving father, compassionate and understanding? And you know, this is a world in which young people are learning, making mistakes. Dear God, you're so often. Give people time to grow. Be patient. Patience is a wonderful virtue. I think God has got it in spades.
Out there, heroic peace is calling. In the bonds of love we meet. For the world, a new day dawning and shining.